Dylan Roof may have confessed to the crime, but there's still a long process to go through. He's charged with 9 counts of murder, 1 count of possession of a firearm during the commission of a violent crime. Keep in mind, aside from those charges, Justice Department also looking into hate crime charges. South Carolina also has the death penalty in cases which warrant it, such as more than 1 person killed in one act. And Governor Nikki Haley says in this case, she's for it. Let's bring in attorney Nick Fortuna. He's going to give us some analysis now. So it was interesting, Nick, to hear our reporter on the ground there talk about the judge. This could be a speedy sort of a hearing because 2 questions, risk to innocent citizens and flight risk.
In this circumstance, I don't think is virtually no chance that he'll get bail. That's why I agree with the reporter on the ground. The judge, will listen to argument about him being tied to the community and things like that, but there's no way that the community is going to, the judge is going to let him out in the community again. Right. He has just, he's a hateful person with a tremendous amount of problems, limited education. They don't want him in the community again. All
right, let's talk about the fact that South Carolina does not have a hate crime on the books. How does that affect this case?
I don't think it affects it that much. Hate crimes make it a little bit harder for the prosecutor to prove the case because there's an additional element. They have to prove why the person committed the murder, not that they just committed the murder. In this circumstance, many jurisdictions find it burdensome. I think the hate crime statutes are more political in nature. They show the community or the target audience that they're there for them. They look to protect them. They just have enhanced penalties. Here we have 9 murders. This person he doesn't need enhanced penalties. He's going to probably get the death penalty.
Okay, let's look at the states that have no hate crime statutes: South Carolina, Arkansas, Wyoming, Georgia, and Michigan. But what you're saying is that sometimes it makes it harder to prove. And in this case, he's going to probably get the immense penalty, possibly death as well. All right, definition of a hate crime. Let's take a look at that.
Okay.
Race, color, religion, national origin, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, or any disability. So obviously in this case, because he went after African Americans, it would fall under this statute if there was one.
And there's a federal statute, the hate crime statute, and typically the federal statute is sort of a backstop if the state prosecution doesn't result in the appropriate result. That the federal government will step in, the Justice Department will step in.
Well, would that happen before or after the first trial?
Typically, not always, typically the feds wait to see what happens in the state prosecution. Give an example, the Eric Garner case. They didn't get a grand jury indictment. The feds are now looking into the violation of civil rights.
Okay, I just want to alert our viewers that what you see on the other side of your screen here now is what we're waiting for this suspect, alleged murderer, to come in for this, first court hearing. It could be swift, it may not be, but the judge really has 2 things to think about: risk to innocent citizens in the community, yes or no, and is this particular person, alleged murderer, a flight risk? So we're going to be seeing that live as it happens. In the meantime, let's talk a little bit about Roof's criminal history. Take a look at this. February 28th, arrested for possession of illegal narcotics. April 26th, charged with trespassing in a mall parking lot. All right, so let's go back to Nick now, an attorney here. How does this factor in at all into this particular phase of what we're doing now?
Because the crimes are so substantially different. They're mostly minor crimes, trespassing. He acted very strangely within one of the stores, possession of illegal narcotics. They weren't, it was a prescription drug that he didn't have a prescription for. I don't think it's going to have a big impact on what his propensity to commit further crimes when they're analyzing this. The crime he just committed now, or allegedly committed now, 9 people dead. No matter what his prior criminal history is, that alone is enough to keep him in.
Okay. What about the insanity situation? Because, many times in cases like this that are horrific, that seems to be the defense. Do you think that's going to happen here?
Well, there's certainly defense lawyers are going to pursue whether or not they can get support for an insanity defense. They'll have them evaluated by psychiatrists. I mean, there's so much evidence of guilt here. There's very little room for them to defend this case. So as a matter of course, they will look at that. I don't know what his psychological evaluation is, but it takes very little for them to find you sane to stand trial. It's just a very low standard, whether or not you knew right from wrong at the time you were committing the crime,
right.
whether you know.
Okay, stand by if you can, Nick, just for a moment. Is Mike Tobin still available for us, by the way? He's not available. Okay, I just want to tell our viewers right now, it looked as if a police officer came out and did this with his fingers, giving the sign of 2, which we're going to assume right now means that this could be a 2-minute warning before we see this alleged murderer come in and face a judge for the first time. As we've been talking about now live, what's going to happen is that it could be a speedy kind of a hearing where the judge is going to be asking 2 questions. Is Dylan Roof a risk to innocent citizens in the community? Undoubtedly, that's going to be a yes. The second question is Dylan Roof a flight risk? Undoubtedly, that's also going to be a yes. Wouldn't you agree with that, Nick?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's why in most murder charges, especially when you have substantial evidence, like in this case, a confession, you have eyewitnesses, and I'm sure they have forensic evidence that they're not going to let him out into the community.
Well, let's talk about that confession for a moment, because how important will that be? Let's say that they don't have any other forensic evidence. I mean, I'm sure they do, but let's say that they don't. How does a confession play into that?
A confession properly taken is one of the most powerful evidence the prosecutor can have. You know, witnesses in a high stressful situation like that don't always say the same thing or don't have the same perception. Lots going on with those people. They're targets of the crime themselves. They're not necessarily the most reliable reporter of the facts. He confessed to the crime. If they don't have sufficient forensic evidence, you have witnesses that say contradictory things, this will be a very powerful tool for the prosecutors.
All right, so I keep wondering, it's going to continue to go on, and it's unbelievable that 9 lives have been just taken out, snuffed out, by the act of one person who appears to be either mentally ill, deranged, or full of hate, or all the above.
It's a tragic circumstance, and we've had so many of these in the recent years. It's just, you know, there's got to be a broader policy issue to stop these kinds of acts, or to, you know, prevent these people from going this far. You know, it's really terribly unfortunate.
Okay, what's going to happen for the kind of attorney that Dylan Roof is going to get? Because ostensibly he's going to be given somebody by the government, right?
Right. He'll probably be appointed, you know, public defender. I'm sure within the community he's going to be ostracized somewhat, but those guys are usually very professional.
You're talking about the attorney, whether it's a man or a woman will be ostracized for taking the case. Do they have a choice?
In most cases, you know, I guess if they had extreme objection, but that's part of their job. They have to take the case. Someone has to be assigned within the office of the public defender. They're usually very professional. They don't take the community pressure to heart, and they usually do the best they can for their clients, you know, in these circumstances.
Are we going to see that public defender at this hearing?
Well, typically, during an arraignment, you are assigned a public defender. It might not be the same one. You'll be assigned an attorney. Might not be the same one who will conduct the trial. But yes, he's entitled to representation at this point. That's the only way someone's going to present a bail application, through the attorney.
So how does that work? Your name comes up in the spin cycle, and so you just happen to be the one, and they say, hey, it's your turn now to represent this hateful person?
Yeah, usually public defenders' offices have a group of attorneys that handle the most serious cases, murder, the ones that you know, where the defendant is really loathsome and they committed the most serious crime. They're the most experienced at that, so they do have a rotation within that group, and they get assigned, you know.
Interesting. All right.
It was a bail hearing. The judge took the opportunity to address the community concerns, and it is the most unusual thing I've ever seen, you know. But maybe he thought the issue was bigger than just this hearing. He had no authority to set bond on the murder charges. We were talking earlier, there was no way they were going to...
Well, I wanted to ask you about that. So he sets the bond for a Roof at $1 million, but that's only on the one count of a weapons charge.
Right.
Okay.
Possession of a loaded weapon.
Okay, so why can't he have anything to do with the 9 counts of murder?
It's a statutory provision. Some states have that you're not allowed to set bail on murder charges, so he's automatically remanded. He has to be held once he's charged with murder.
Okay. So there's no way that if he comes up with $1 million, he's getting out.
No. He'll still have to stay in. What that does is, if for some reason the murder charges are dropped, which is not going to happen, he still has $1 million bond on the weapons charge.
Okay, so the attorney for the 9th Circuit Court about to give us an update in the case. This is going to be in a press conference, as you can see now on the right side of your screen, after we've just heard now from Dylan Roof. So he's going to be in court, as I just mentioned, on October 23rd, followed by a second appearance on February 5th of 2016, if we can already put our brains that far ahead. So now we're waiting for this other press conference. What do you think we might find out here, Nick?
At this point, they're going to talk about how the charges are going to proceed, probably, and what they intend to do as far as the death penalty is concerned. But they've already started talking. The governor of the state already said that absolutely intend to pursue the death penalty.
Is that her decision?
No, it isn't. It's the prosecutor's decision on that. It's within their discretion. And one thing I'd say is that if there is a trial, it's because they are pursuing the death penalty, because they have nothing to lose by going to trial. You know, if they don't take a plea for something less than the death penalty, which it doesn't sound like at this point anybody's inclined to do, the defendant has nothing to lose by going to trial.
Does any of that play, his demeanor there and how he answers the questions, into any kind of an insanity defense?
Well, they'll look at his behavior before being evaluated. But the most important part is to have him evaluated by a psychiatrist, get the report on whether or not he's sane enough to stand trial, knows from right from wrong, can help his own defense.
But I'm saying, just in this little bail hearing right here, he seemed to understand the judge pretty well.
No, absolutely.
Does this play into it?
Yeah, no, they'll look at evaluate all his behavior prior to going into the medical evaluation. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Nick Fortuna, thank you so much for coming back. You may want to stick around because we just don't know what else is going to happen.